Buster the Bruiser. Malone had never been a man of grand ambitions. Growing up in the working-class neighborhoods of Detroit, he learned early on that life was about grit, resilience, and making the most of what you had. At 27, he was a small-time boxer with a modest record of 12 wins, 8 losses, and 2 draws. He fought in dingy gyms and community centers, his bouts barely drawing a crowd. By day, he worked at Johnny's Meats, a local packing plant, hauling sides of beef and dreaming of something more. Though he wasn't quite sure what that something was, everything changed on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Buster was elbow-deep in a crate of pork chops when Johnny burst into the break room, waving his phone like a man possessed. "Buster, you're not gonna believe this. You've been called up. You're fighting John Mass." Buster froze, a pork chop dangling from his hand. John Mass? The John Mass? Undefeated world heavyweight champion John Mass? "The one and only," Johnny exclaimed. "His opponent tore his ACL in training. They need a replacement, and somehow your name came up." Buster's heart raced. John Mass was a titan in the boxing world, a man who had knocked out every challenger in his path. Buster had seen him fight on TV, a relentless force of nature with fists like sledgehammers. The idea of stepping into the ring with him was equal parts thrilling and terrifying. The next few days were a whirlwind. Promoters descended on Detroit, eager to spin the narrative of the working-class underdog taking on the undefeated champion. Buster was thrust into the spotlight, his face plastered on posters and his name trending online, but beneath the excitement he felt a gnawing doubt. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't a world-class fighter. He was just Buster Malone, a guy who punched bags and hauled meat. Enter Marshall "Marty" Martinez, a feisty former bantamweight contender who had retired after a series of brutal losses. Marty was a grizzled veteran with a sharp tongue and a heart of gold. He'd been coaching at the local gym for years, and when he heard about Buster's big break, he showed up uninvited at Buster's apartment. "You're gonna get killed out there," Marty said bluntly. "But if you're stupid enough to take this fight, I'm stupid enough to train you." Training with Marty was grueling. The old fighter pushed Buster harder than he'd ever been pushed, drilling him on footwork, defense, and strategy. "Mass is a bull," Marty said. "He'll come at you hard and fast. You gotta be smart, stay light on your feet, and pick your shots." Buster absorbed every word, determined to prove he wasn't just a sacrificial lamb. Amid the chaos, Buster found an unexpected source of comfort in Tessa, Johnny's younger sister. Tessa was quiet and unassuming, a wallflower who spent her days working at the local library and her nights reading romance novels. She had always been kind to Buster, but they'd never spent much time alone. That changed one evening when she showed up at the gym with a thermos of homemade soup. "You look like you could use a break," she said softly. Buster was touched by her thoughtfulness. Over the next few weeks, they began spending more time together. Tessa would sit in the corner of the gym, knitting or reading, while Buster trained. Afterward, they'd share a meal or take a walk through the neighborhood, talking about everything and nothing. Buster found himself drawn to her quiet strength and gentle humor. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had something, someone, to fight for. As the fight approached, the pressure mounted. The media painted Buster as a hopeless underdog, a mere stepping stone for Mass's continued dominance. But Buster refused to be intimidated. He had Marty in his corner, Tessa in the stands, and a fire in his belly that wouldn't be extinguished. The night of the fight, the arena was packed to the rafters. Buster stepped into the ring, his heart pounding. Across from him stood John Mass, a mountain of muscle and menace. The bell rang, and the fight began. Mass came at Buster like a freight train, throwing heavy punches with brutal precision. Buster focused on staying mobile, dodging and weaving as Marty had taught him. He landed a few solid shots, but Mass seemed unfazed. By the third round, Buster was battered and bleeding, his body screaming for respite. But he refused to give up. He thought of Marty's relentless training, of Tessa's quiet encouragement, of the people back home who believed in him. Summoning every ounce of strength, he launched a counterattack, landing a series of punches that stunned Mass. The crowd roared as Buster pressed his advantage, his fists flying with a speed and power he didn't know he had. The fight went the distance, a grueling 12-round battle that left both men exhausted. When the final bell rang, Buster collapsed into Marty's arms, his body spent, but his spirit unbroken. The judge's decision was unanimous. John Mass retained his title. The crowd erupted as Buster raised his arms in victory, the bruises on his face telling the story of a grueling fight. He had silenced his critics with a performance full of grit and heart, proving that his determination outweighed any doubts. Across the ring, his opponent nodded in respect, acknowledging the strength and resilience that had earned Buster the win. After the fight, Buster's girlfriend stood waiting for him backstage. Their relationship had been strained by his relentless training and the pressure of his career, but in that moment, she saw not just a fighter, but the man she fell in love with. "You did it," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "We did it," Buster replied, pulling her close. "You kept me grounded when I almost lost myself. I'm sorry for all the times I pushed you away." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I know how much this means to you, and I'll always be here. But let's promise to find balance together." From that day forward, their relationship grew stronger. She was a talented photographer, began documenting Buster's journey, combining their worlds in a way that brought them closer. She captured the sweat and triumph of his training sessions, the quiet moments of reflection, and the fire in his eyes as he prepared for the next challenge. Buster threw himself back into training with renewed focus, not just for the sport, but for the life he was building with her. His coach noticed the change, a calm determination that hadn't been there before. Buster wasn't just fighting for titles anymore. He was fighting for a future that mattered. As he laced up his gloves one morning, Buster glanced at a framed photo his girlfriend had taken of his victorious moment in the ring. Beneath it, she'd written, "The fight is just the beginning." And for Buster, it truly was.